Indeed, many Nigerians will say that it's interesting. It's never right to be alone. It's never right to be alone. That you understand. So my colleague Patience Monday is definitely in the house and she's looking all radiant, ready for the weekend. No surprise, she's looking so beautiful. Patience, good morning to you.
Good morning, Mr. Michael. I know.
No need of me asking you why you're smiling. I heard you say it earlier. So
of course. I'm here on Viewpoint here on Atlantic TV. Well, here on Viewpoint, as you already know, we'll begin with the dailies and the dialogue takes center stage, and the news comes around. Do you want to connect with us on all our social media platforms of Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram at Atlantic Media and TV. We'll go on the quick break. When we return, the dailies will be next.
Atlantic TV.
Well, you do know the dailies will always take center stage on our Viewpoint on Atlantic TV, and today will be no different. You do know we also have 7 papers. We have the Punch, the Vanguard, the Guardian, Daily Trust, This Day newspaper, Nigerian Tribune, and definitely we'll be looking always to end things up with the Daily Sun. But anyway, sunny it is, but Friday it is. Let's start with the Punch, and let's see if it has its usual puncher. Well, on the Punch this morning, the lead story reads, APC consensus push faces resistance in states. I remember we looked at this critically yesterday on Dialogue, so no surprise, we're having it. And we're still talking about primary elections. Yobe, Ogun, Sokoto, Plateau, Kwara aspirants oppose consensus demand competitive race. Ondo, Benue, Oyo get up for primaries as Tinubu governors aspirants submit nomination form. APC adopt direct primaries for presidential ticket. Well, anyway, okay. Well, anyway, we thought it's not going to be. But anyway, what it is grab a copy of the Punch. Page 2 and 7 have more of that details, and you'll be just enjoying it all the same. Let's see if we take some other leading stories. See on the front page of the Punch this morning. Sunbat to launch 70,000 metric ton of cocoa and 80,000 metric ton of cashew processing plants in March 2027. More like an editorial, but in one I feel you need to also read up on page 25. 2027, Jonathan considers comeback as court hears eligibility suit today. Well, but what party? Well, anyway, let me not ask that question. Page 8, more of that, have more of that story. And First Holdco or First Holding Company, profit rocket 72.2% in first quarter. Wow, that's indeed a great one. But you can get more of that story also on page 25. But you do know on the Punch this morning, it looks as if we have little or nothing to show. But what I would say, well, it's more of an advert. And, well, you can just go grab that, the copy of the Punch, and get all of that. That's the much you can take from the Punch newspaper.
Making rounds on The Guardian this morning, the leading story reads, Nigeria Football Federation sit tight Syrian, how skilled process makes life benches of football administrators. And that very big story is on page 4 and 5. Still on the front page, Senate reverses controversial eligibility rule for presiding officers. Well, you can get more of that on page 3. Still on page 3 of The Guardian, Nigeria protests killings in South Africa as Tinubu orders crisis notification units. The Reps launch probe into death old federal government raising building material costs. We're still on page 3 of The Guardian. Let's look and take more of the leading stories on the front page. First Old Company PLC profit rocket 72.2% in first quarter. Well, that story continued on page 10. Still on the front page. APC paves Tinubu's 2027 run as opposition battles INEC timelines lawsuit. Well, you can get more of that on page 6. ADC commits to court ruling, dissociate from proposed state congresses. Well, you can get of that on page 7. Still on the front page, dozens feared killed. Villages raised in Kogi communal clash. Well, it's a disturbing one on page 29. NIMET warns of large flooding in 19 states. Partners NEMA on action plan. The other very stories on page 28. 2027, Jonathan explore options as court fixes today for suit on its eligibility. Well, as Mr. Michael said, we are not going to ask which party, but you can get of that on page 7. Nopeng seeks transparency, timely execution as federal government moves to revamp Warri Port Harcourt refineries. Or you can get all of that on page 7. And let's see the picture of the day. The picture of the day is, well, more of a supporter of the late story. Well, that is much you can take on The Guardian this morning.
We are seeing Friday, so let's go to This Day today and see what This Day has as a leading one on its front page. On This Day newspaper, concerns mount over NNPC fresh MOUs with Chinese firm to revamp refineries. Remember, we looked at this critically on Tuesday, and indeed it was interesting. But riders to follow. Our federal government failed to explore local capacities of Conoil, Seplat, First E&P, Reliance, and others. And it's a major one there. Daily Oil says a selected Chinese firm lacked technical financial capacity and urges national oil firm to reserve existing refinery contracts. And you can get all of that on page 8 of This Day newspaper. Let's see if we take some other leading ones still on the front page of This Day this morning. Shettima submit Tinubu's form to APC as Jonathan, I will consult widely on 2027 polls. Well, don't forgive me anytime he says that. It makes me laugh. Page 8 has that story. Progressive Governor House Uzodima as forum chair, tout Mba as possible successor. And you can succeed on that story on page 7. Ameputon, insecurity threat to 2027 polls as Dusu. No special treatment for any party. Senate approved bill restricting pre-election cases to Federal High Court and Court of Appeal. Presidential election case to start at Appeal Court. And I'll tell you to start that story up on page 8. Let's see if we have some leading ones. Sunbirds to launch 70,000 metric tons of cocoa, 80,000 metric tons of cashew processing plant in March. Sharing news on page 32. And well, the picture of the day is Tinubu nomination form submitted to APC National Working Committee. And you can see the Vice President Kashim Shettima submitting President Bola Ahmed Tinubu presidential form and expression of interest form at the National Working Committee of the All Progressive Congress in Abuja yesterday. And you can understand why all of them seems to be smiling. But that's much from This Day.
Let's check out stories making it to the headline of the Nigerian Tribune this morning. On the Nigerian Tribune, the leading story reads, uncertainty over Jonathan's links to 2027 presidential contest, and the riders to that, contesting for the presidency is not a computer game. Well, I will consult widely, it says as youth rally at his Abuja residence. Adds that Nigeria has highest voter apathy. Court to hear suit on its eligibility today. Well, you can get off the story on page 4. Let's see if we can take more of the leading story still on the front page. First Old Company profit rocket 72.2% in first quarter. Well, that story continues on page 7. Still on the front page. Senate resigned amended standing rules, retained previous provisions. Well, you can get up that on page 27. Billionaire drug baron, 2 female kingpins fall in global sting operation as NDLEA US deal orders smash transitional drug network. Well, you can get more of that on page 30. Electoral Act, new amendment block forum shopping. New amendment block forum shopping. And the riders to that, National Assembly governorship pre-election cases to start as Federal High Court. Presidency opens at Appeal Court, terminates at Supreme Court. Well, you can get more of that details on page 5. Court convicts ex-Power Minister Saleh over 33.8 billion naira fraud. Wow, that was a huge one on page 2. And talking health, new oxygen gel could help prevent amputation, says scientists. But you can get more of that on page 22. Still on the front page, defection hits PDP in Oyo State. Aspirant leads exodus. Well, party members fill APM forms on easy come over and they can be as Makinde's choice rather. Owuseni resigns as special advisor on security. You can get more of that on page 3. Now let's see the picture of the day. The picture of the day is that of Lagos State Deputy Governor Dr. Kadiri Obafemi during his submission of his expression of interest on nomination forms for the 2027 Lagos State governorship election at the party's National Secretariat, Abuja, yesterday. Well, that's what you can take on the Nigeria Tribune this morning.
Daily Sun is next on paper review. Dailies it is. And on Daily Sun this morning, the lead story reads, I am consulting widely on 2027 presidential race. Sorry, it's not me, Michael Gobadia, it's Jonathan. Charging supporters to get voters' card before asking to contest. And you can get that story up on page 6. Let's see if we take some other leading stories still on the front page of the Daily Sun. APC governors will deliver Tinubu in 2027. Uzodimma on page 8. IMF fears AI cyber attacks could cripple global financial system. It's a disturbing story on page 25. Let's see if we take some other leading ones, still on the front page of the Daily Sun. Senate moves to cut off tribunal presidential election litigation. Fresh amendment approves Federal High Court, Appeal Court jurisdiction for pre-election matters is a story that matters on page 6. Gunmen adopt 6 Nasarawa Varsity students. Birom Youth fought police on mass burial killing, says denier misleading. And don't mislead that story, but read it up on page 4. Court convicts ex-power minister Maman in absentia over 33.8 billion naira fraud, orders his arrest. And you can really arrest that story up on page 4. Senate makes U-turn on standing rules for electing presiding officers, retain previous provision. Now, you know, the shouting between Oshomole and Akpabio is yielding fruit. But I'll tell you to get that story up on page 27. The picture of the day is member of the coalition of Jonathan 2027 asking, or rather doing visit to former President Abuja. Jonathan acknowledged their cheers from the crowd. That's much we can take from the Daily Sun.
I trust you're having a good day on today, Friday morning, as we look at the Daily Trust this morning. And on the Daily Trust, the leading story reads, 33.8 billion naira fraud conviction revives Mambila scandal. Well, you can continue that on page 3 and 4. Still on the front page, Senate reverses leadership eligibility rule. You can get up that on page 8. 2027, Shettima leads 12 governors to submit stimulus form. Well, all of that can play out on page 11. What should you know about antivirus? Well, we really want to know more about it, and you can get that up on page 21. Still on the front page, let's see if we can get more of the leading story. How Jonathan presidential bid resurfaced. Wow, it's a major one on page 5. Government abducts 6 Nasarawa Varsity students. Well, it's a disturbing one on page 26. Bello verifies defection. What's changed? Well, we want to know what's changed on that on page 12. Nigerian exporters embrace China's zero tariff policy with caution. Is a major one on page 7. But let's see the picture of the day. The picture of the day is that of the members of the National Youth Service Corps Batch A Stream 2 in cultural display at their camp across states.
Well, anyway, I hope they'll be dancing like this when they finish service. Because job. Anyway, let's just leave them. Let them be enjoying themselves. Let them dance to high heavens. But anyway, the next paper for us to look at will be the Vanguard newspaper. And on the Vanguard newspaper this morning, the leading story reads, xenophobia. Federal government moves to evacuate Nigerians from South Africa. Economists caution against blanket sanction of South African companies. Targeting South African businesses inappropriate, counterproductive, says Muda Yusuf. It amounts to economic self-sabotage, Oye Dikachi. Nigeria can't afford to jeopardize future partnership with South Africa. Don't read. But I'll tell you to deal with that story up on page 5. Let's see if we take some other leading stories here on the front page of the Vanguard this morning. First hold company profit rocks 72.2% in first quarter is a very cheering one for shareholders of that very company. And let's see if we take some other leading ones still on the front page of the Vanguard this morning. 2027, Jonathan Way's presidential comeback is a major screamer on page 8. Taraba, I'm handling local government autonomy, says Kifas on page 9. Oil price drops, marketers keep mum. Pump price high is a very disturbing one on page 19. Nigeria now walking, Shetima insists, submits Tinubu presidential nomination form on page 9. Senate makes U-turn, rescinds controversial rule barring first-time senators. 6 governors, 15 ex-governors, late Akeredolu's wife Betty joined 11th Senate race, all on page 8. Well, let's quickly go to Mr. and Mrs. Always good to have or listen to them. Let's see if we get some advice from them. As usual, ladies first. It's a kind of collaborative business open to men and women who like to invest in a similar venture. They call it scratch my back, I will scratch yours. And anyway, Mr. always have a befitting answer to her. I'm not comfortable with the scratching part. Only God knows where they'll be scratching. But anyway, let's leave where they'll be scratching and go to the picture of the day. And the picture of the day is that of Shetima, Vice President Shetima, submitting Tinubu's nomination form. And you can see the form is indeed very big. But anyway, that's much you can take from the Vanguard and all the papers this lovely Friday morning. I will always implore you, it's a beautiful Friday. Why would you just sit and not enjoy us being with you? So just after the show, do yourself a favor, read up all the stories on the newspaper, anyone that really catches your fancy, and you'll be indeed informing yourself, because it's always said, an informed mind is never a deformed mind. But I'll tell you, don't go anywhere. Relax, be with us. Dialogue will take center stage next, right here on Viewpoint on Atlantic TV.